Yes, I am filming this video on the same day I filmed the last one. That is why I have the same outfit on. Hello everyone, and welcome to the first edition of Webcomic Wednesdays. This is my new series that I'm doing this year, and pretty much every week, well, pretty much every Wednesday from now on, I will be reviewing a webcomic that I've read and either giving my recommendations, my thoughts, everything about it to try and kind of expose and open more people up to this world. And also this is something that I don't see a lot of content about, so I'd love to be able to create some. But today is all about explaining and exploring what to expect with these videos and kind of dipping your toes into the world of webcomics. So the very first thing that we have to answer, I guess, is what is a webcomic? Well, a webcomic is the same thing as a graphic novel or a comic, but essentially it is just published on the internet as opposed to be published in a physical copy. Now this gets a little bit confusing, so stay with me here for a second. Some webcomics do eventually get publication deals and end up getting published as like tangible physical books, but not all of them. So in that weird, like, what is it? A square is a rectangle, but a rectangle is not a square. Some webcomics are graphic novels in the sense that there's a physical publication, but not all graphic novels came from webcomics. Tracking? We're following each other so far? Also, a lot of webcomic artists will choose to publish independently, which is a really great way to support the artist if their books or their comics are something that you really love and that really speak to you. So with that being said, where can you read these comics? On the web. Wow! No, there is usually kind of specific websites that people use in order to try and keep comics gathered in same spaces or to help kind of curate that experience a little bit better. So a lot of people have their own Tumblr page for the comic. That is one way to read them. So for example, like Long Exposure or Heartstopper have pages on Tumblr where all of the comics are posted. It's not my personal favorite way to read it just because of the way that it's a little bit laid out. It's a little bit trickier, and just the clicking and scrolling, sometimes getting back to the beginning, can be a little bit confusing depending how they have it laid out. Other comics have their own personal website that is like specific to that comic, so I'm thinking Check Please on a Sunbeam. I realize I'm throwing these names out, and if you're new to the series you might not know what I'm talking about. But essentially these are curated websites made specifically for the comic. They often have like other side notes or things about characters or that on the side that you can follow, and those ones I find tend to be a little bit more concise because they've been developed with the reading experience in mind. And then there's my personal favorite way to read webcomics, which is on Tapas. Tapas has this incredible feature that's like basically infinity scrolling. So instead of having to like click the arrow and like wait for the next page to load, if you just keep scrolling, it'll just keep loading pages and pages of the webcomic, which is great because it doesn't really slow you down in any way, which can also be detrimental if you just keep scrolling and the next thing you know it's 2 a.m. Some things that I love about webcomics is just something that has always fascinated with me with graphic novels and comics in general is the kind of combination of art and writing and bringing them together and seeing the ways that they complement each other and telling the story through the visual narrative as well as through the written narrative. It's really fascinating to me the way that authors and artists work together and kind of know when they need to step back and let the visuals do the talking and when they need to explain a little bit more of what is going on. I recently was drawing a fan comic for one of the webcomics that I really, really love, and it took me hours to do, and I am not over the moon with the result. Like, I'm okay with some of the cells, but I'm not really happy with all of them. And so to me, it's always just been like mind-boggling the fact that people can create these things and like draw characters consistently. That's just fascinating to me and something that I've always appreciated the talent of, and I feel like it goes really unrecognized. Unfortunately, sometimes in, I think, just like book communities in general, there's this idea that like graphic novels or comics aren't real books, which to those people I say, have you tried making one, for starters? And like, two, books like Watchmen are on the Times list of 100 novels of all time. I actually made a video about graphic novel reader problems that I'll link here. I guess it's here because I'm always pointing to the wrong side. If that's something that you want to check out, it's not my favorite video I've made, but it's kind of a fun skit. So I think that's something that I kind of want to address by making these videos, is having people become more aware of the content that is out there, that is incredible content. And a huge thing about it is a lot of it is available to you absolutely free of charge. One of the webcomics that I read this year was the least logged on my Goodreads wrap-up. So if you do your 2020 Goodreads wrap-up, it'll tell you the book that the most people have logged as having read. So for me, that was like Frankenstein, because like over 1 million people read it last year or something like that. And then the book that the least amount of people have logged as read. And for me, that was a webcomic that I read that like maybe 17 people had logged that they read. So I think just opening people up to the fact that those things are open for people. Especially too, I was reading something really interesting about fan fiction and people who are neurodivergent or have kind of, I guess, their brain works a little bit differently from what society has deemed normal, is I guess the simpler way to explain that. And for me, fan fiction and webcomics kind of fill up this similar space, which when my mental illness is beating the crap out of me, I don't have the mental capacity in order to be able to delve into a brand new world and hold all that space revolving the characters and all of that information. Fanfiction works really well for that because I already know the characters and everything, so I can skim and I know that I'm not missing out on major things because a lot of the characterizations and everything is similar from story to story or author to author. Webcomics work for me in a very similar way, and I think it's just that visual medium helps me kind of have a little bit more space or distance, or give my mind that bit of a rest so I can actually stay in the world and the characters and appreciate everything that's going on, but I'm not feeling emotionally exhausted or completely unable to focus. And I think that's something too that frustrates me when people kind of crap on comics or visual medium, is they don't realize how much more accessible that it can make reading to a lot of people that struggle to read like novels that don't necessarily have that visual component. Just because something like has art in it doesn't mean that it's any less of an interesting or a valuable book. I think the very last thing that I want to cover is just kind of what to expect with this series moving forward. So what I'm kind of thinking is I will tell you what the webcomic is, who it is done by, whether or not it is complete, if there's an update schedule for it, where it is available to be found online. And then after that, I think I'm just going to delve into a little bit of like what I like about it, what I rated it, what the characters in the story and that mean to me. It's all going to be completely spoiler free because this is all about encouraging people to go out and find webcomics that mean a lot to them. One very last thing that I do want to touch on is I did mention earlier that a lot of webcomics are free. Of course, that is wonderful, but it also means that depending on where they're posting it and kind of what the guidelines are of where they're posting it, the creators who are making all this beautiful work might not necessarily get paid for it. So as just a little precursor to this whole journey that you're coming on with me, I just want to say if you watch one of these videos and find a webcomic that you really love and you have the means, please consider supporting your content creators, because in this crazy world that we're living in right now, that little bit of extra support, whether it is buying merch, whether it's buying a poster, I have tons of artwork and stuff up in my room that I bought from content creators. It really goes a long way to supporting them and letting them know that you like the comic. Even if you don't necessarily have the means to buy things, making fan art or posting or sharing about it, doing things like I'm doing right now, also means a lot because it helps a lot of other people hear about those things that they might not have heard about. So yeah, this is one of the new things that I'm super excited about getting to share with you guys this year. This will probably be the longest video. I don't know. I think they're going to be about 5 minutes, but knowing me, I don't know when to shut up, so we'll see. And I will see you all next week for my very first episode of this series. Well, I guess it's the second. This is technically the first. But the first one where I'll dive into a webcomic, and we're going to be talking about Gunnar Craig Court, which is one of the very first webcomics that I ever read. So I'll see you guys next Wednesday.